Welcome back to McCarthy Performance. We will be prepping the pack springs for the AFR heads. And when they have this amount of spring pressure on them and a titanium retainer, let's back up. If it's got a titanium retainer, I'm going to prep them. So this is a pack 1226 spring. If you're curious, lightly touch them. You can buy a micro polished spring. But sometimes even them need a little bit of work. But it just depends on what you're going to do. Some people might think this is a perfect waste of time. And if you think that, then probably this video ain't for you. So we'll start getting on these, going on these, and we'll break them a little bit. I use an MX wheel on these, and that's basically a rubber gridded impregnated mounting stone on a die grinder. We'll use electric because it'll be quicker that way and the air compressor won't run. So that's what we're going to do today, and we'll get to it. All these hats, but they're basically a locator, and this one's going to center up on the inner diameter of the spring. It's going to ID off the valve guide, so it's not going to move around, and you're not going to, when you start doing triple springs or duals with dampeners, and depending on how the spring is wound, you got to really be aware of your valve seal clearance. Now these are cladded steel, but they have no coating of rubber, so these are the closest in tolerance that you can get. If you start running different springs, you might have to cut the seal dimension for the seal, so you can go to a smaller overall outside dimension. Don't want to go too much further than that. So, and also when you're doing shims, what you want to watch out for is this is a VSI, and it's a hardened shim. It's blue. They're called their HP series. This is the regular series. These are all right for just general spring adjusting. You can use these if you put them under one of these. I try not to put these under high spring pressure springs. So if you're building a race type engine with high spring pressure, these shims, you try to stay away from them unless they're going under, let's say this would be a cup, or they're going under a locator like this, which I call them hats. At that point, it don't matter. But you want to get into the habit of putting your shims underneath your locators because these are harder. Most normally, all the time, they're harder. You don't want stamped ones with higher spring pressure. You want machined ones. These are, I'm assuming, out of chromoly, and they're relatively pretty tough. Okay, now, just because this one's copper colored, that usually stands for the clearance on VSI. Copper is 60, plain is 30, silver is 30, and these ones, purplish black, are very thin, 15 thousandths. You don't ever want to put one in there. You put one inside a cup, you want to shim everything under the cup. If you do this, what happens is a lot of times this is so thin that the tail of the spring will hook into that and it'll cut it. And so that's kind of why I break the tails on the springs, is to avoid cutting. And with higher spring pressure in titanium, it kind of goes hand in hand. You can go to a tool steel retainer. They make them now that are lightweight, that are close. So if you do an endurance, or you've got a street car that's got a lot of spring pressure on it and you're running it on the street or off-road, titanium may not be for you, but tool steel could very well be the thing for you to do. But anyways, this is a drag car, and we're going to run titanium. you know, so that's kind of the deal. I'm going to start breaking these. You want to make sure there's no sharp edges on them at the minimum. And, you know, you want to make sure that the tail is a blended back. There is a way to put the spring on correctly. Well, the way I do it is I always want the tail of the spring to go away from the inner part of the retainer. So, you know, you don't want this part here hooking and carving into anything that's softer, because it will do that. So whatever's the softest on the valve train, you don't want to have that hook curling into it. You can blend these back, and I'll show you how I do that. It's pretty simple. I will take a 60,000 shim, and I'll just shove it underneath the spring so I don't polish or nick this. So I just do that. And then I'll blend it. And I'll show a few springs how I do that. And that's what we got going today. Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm not going to edit that last video. I realized that when I was doing it that I wasn't even near the screen with the locator and not what to do. Don't do this. You don't want to use a shim like this and put it in there like that. That's a lazy way to do it. If you're going to do that, you put the shim underneath it. And the reason being is because the spring will hook you this, and it'll dig into it, and it'll peel it out. I've seen it happen way too many times. These things, some of them are good. The stock GM ones they put under the big blocks are pretty hard. These things, some of them are not very hard. So the spring will just chew that up. It'll hook up underneath the tail of the spring, and it makes a mess. And you don't want to do that either. You don't want to set it in here, because this is going to be the softest material, and they will get chewed up. Now, if you put a hardened one in there and you know it's hard, could you get away with it? Yeah, but I just make the habit of putting them underneath it. You can shim, you know, like I said, excessive clearances. If you've got like 80 thousandths and you don't want to lose too much location, this might not be either one of these might not be a bad way to go. But at that point, you can adjust usually your retainers. We won't go any further than that. You can adjust your retainers and locks usually to get rid of 50 thousandths if you've got too much assembled height. That usually isn't the case. It's usually you never have enough assembled height. But that's for another video. So I won't do all of them, but anyways, that's kind of how you do that deal. And of course the outers, we're gonna do them about the same as the inners. I'm gonna shove a 60 thousandths shim under it, just so we don't hit the spring. And usually I do the inners first. So let's go around the inner. Just lightly break that. Like I said, we're not trying to change the dimension. So that one's pretty much done. And yeah, it's kind of a real bear to try to make a video because I don't know where the camera is exactly. So I'm trying to do this so you can see it. And it's really hard for me to do this and look through the camera. So you'll have to excuse some of the crappy camera work. But anyways, that's kind of how you prep springs. At least that's how I do it. Of course, all these opinions are mine, And you might have an opinion of your own. That's fine. This is what's always worked for me. Okay, so we're doing the outers now, and we're going to do it the same way. Shove a shim underneath it, break the tail of it off, round it off a little bit so it doesn't catch. That'll allow the retainer to skid along this top of the spring and not hook into that part of the spring. So we want to round this sharp point off a bit. And then we're going to go in and lightly take this edge off. Like I've said, we don't want to change the spring. We're not trying to remachine the spring. And on that point, we always want to make sure the titanium retainer fits. Now it should not be loose. It shouldn't flop around. It should fit tight. It should be a light press, but it shouldn't be something you got to squeeze to get it to go on. If it's a tight press or it's not seating correctly, you get that or more. You always want to make sure that the inner spring, if it's a dual with a dampener or a triple, you always want to make sure that fits correctly on the retainer. This one does not. That's why it's like that. There's a couple ways you can deal with this. I have a lathe and an arbor that for these 10-degree, Super 7s, 7 degrees, Super 7, people call them 8s now, but I've gone in there and I've trimmed just a little bit off so they'll fit. But you always want to make sure the retainer seats and fits all the way down. Now that's when it doesn't. If I push hard, it will, and that's why the inside of the tail dug into there. And if it doesn't set all the way down, then you could be going into coil bind, breaking the springs. So you'll want to make sure that you have a retainer that fits properly. Now this retainer is a replacement retainer and it fits properly. It goes right on. It's a little bit snug. It's not a lot though, see? Goes right on, take it right off. The other one, not so much. And it's setting all the way to the top. You can see that it's all the way to the top. So, okay. I think that's going to cover it on this video. Just kind of a short, quick little video.